Hello and welcome to our Q&A for our upcoming course, Integrating Your Head, Heart, and Hora, where you'll explore your 3 wisdom centers through 6 ancient traditions for an embodied and authentic life. I'm Ann Patricio, your host, and I'm honored to be here today as we explore the teachings of Shawn Esbjorn-Hargens and address your questions about his course coming up here at the Shift Network, which begins on Thursday, February the 13th at 9 a.m. Pacific. Now, if you're unable to join us live, you can still participate in this course, and I'll tell you all about that later, as well as lots of other things. But first, I want to introduce my guest. Shawn Esbjorn-Hargens is the founder of Meta Integral, a social impact network that supports change leaders around the world in applying integrative principles. Shawn is a prolific writer, editor, and has published over 30 articles and 7 books. He's made a substantial contribution to the field of integral theory, integral ecology, integral research, integral education, and integral business. His most recent book is Meta Theory for the 21st Century. Shawn's passion comes from his love of being alive. I love this. His commitment of looking directly at reality without blinking, and his desire to increase people's experience of intimacy and being. And now, join me in welcoming Shawn, who's going to lead us in an opening practice. Welcome, Shawn. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Ann. Yeah, it's wonderful to see you and to connect. So shall I dive into the practice? All right, so let's do that. Yeah. I call this practice the triple check-in. And as you can imagine, it's checking in with each of our 3 wisdom centers. And it's a very quick practice, and you can do it, throughout your day, even multiple times. But in essence, you're really connecting with each of your center, and you can do this in any order you want. But for this practice, I'll lead us through connecting with the head first, then the heart, and then the Hora or the belly center. And most people find that order to be easiest. But when you're doing this on your own, you can do it in any order you want. What you'll do, and we'll start this in just a moment, but let me just kind of frame things up a little bit for you. We're going to identify a word or a short phrase for each center in response to the following question: how am I doing today? Or you can ask each center directly, how are you doing today? Some people find this direct approach more helpful in kind of connecting with each of the center, almost like treating each center as kind of a dialogue partner or a friend. And it's like you're checking in with the friend to kind of find out, how's it going today? And so this can be a useful way of checking in with each center. So there's 3 phases to this practice, and it just takes a couple minutes. The first phase will be checking in with all 3 centers and then jotting down, short word or phrase. And then the next phase is, stepping back and taking a meta view and looking at everything you wrote down. And then the last phase is just to kind of translate any insights into, a simple action for the day. All right, so that's what we're going to be doing. So let's go ahead and start. So just take a couple deep breaths and just kind of connect with your body and yourself as we begin this practice. And we'll start with your head and your mind. And so just ask, how am I doing today? Or how are you doing today? Connecting with your mind or your head center, and just jotting down a single phrase or a word. And it can be something like confusion, overwhelm, clarity, vision. So just jot that down, whatever comes to you as you check in with what's happening in your head center in this moment. And now we'll ask your heart the same thing. How am I doing today? In the context of my heart center, or how are you doing today? Talking directly to your heart center. And then jot down whatever comes. And this can be, something like open, tender, stretched, happy, heavy, or it could be a longer phrase. I'll just give you a moment to sense in and jot something down. All right, and now we'll do the third center, the Hara or the belly or body. And again, asking yourself or your center how you're doing or how it is doing. And it might be things like present, solid, tired, grounded, exhausted, unclear about boundaries. I'll just give you a moment to capture something. And you don't want to overthink this. It's just kind of a quick check-in, and just kind of usually there's one word or a phrase that's kind of available that you can capture. And so now that you have, a single word or a short phrase for each of the three centers, then, take a look at the paper, or if you've just done it in your mind, just remembering kind of each of the phrases, and just sense into or look at, what's the pattern here? Like, are two centers kind of reporting out that they're doing well and one center's not doing so well? Are all three centers kind of giving you information and feedback that they're stretched, and, or are all three kind of in a good solid place and kind of, on, their optimal expression? So just noticing kind of what is the pattern here as you check in with yourself through the three centers. And just noticing kind of what insights come to you as you kind of get this deeper look into how you're doing in this moment. I'll just give you a few moments to just kind of sense into that and see what emerges in your awareness as you reflect on what each of the three centers is telling you about this particular moment. And then as the last phase is kind of translating any insights into action. So, you want to take the new scene that this practice has provided you and translate it into a simple next step, usually for the day, such as I'm going to slow down today. I'm going to connect with a friend. I'm going to stay focused on the project, whatever it might be, just something simple that just kind of helps orient yourself to how you want to show up from this point forward in light of the information you've just been able to get from all three centers. All right, so that's the practice. It's very simple. It's just checking in, the triple check-in, as I call it, checking in with each of the three centers, then stepping back, kind of seeing what the view is when you sense into all three, and then translating that into a simple kind of orientation or focus or set of next steps for the day. All right, Anne, so there we go.
That was perfect. Thank you, Shawn.
Great.
So we're going to spend the rest of our time together exploring your questions for Shawn as we prepare for his video course, Integrating Your Head, Heart, and Hara, which begins on Thursday, February the 13th. Please go over and visit our website, threewisdomcenters.com. You can use the number 3 or spell out the word 3, threewisdomcenters.com, to learn more about the 7-module course, and you'll find a link to register there as well. So we received several questions through our webcast, and those of you that are joining us live, please go ahead and type your question in and I'll read it out for you. We'll start with this one that came in through the webcast. Can you tell us more about the Hara? Where exactly is that, and how do we access it?
Yeah, it's a good place to start because the Hara is usually the one center that is a little more elusive and we're not as familiar with as the other centers. I mean, it's obvious where our head center is, and it's generally obvious where our heart center is, even though it's not the physical heart, but it's kind of the energetic heart, which is more in the center of the chest. But the Hara, is a little more mysterious, and Hara is actually a Japanese word. And other traditions use words to refer to the center. Like in the Sufi tradition, they use Koth. In the Chinese tradition, they use Dantian and so forth. I like to use the word Hara because it starts with an H and it goes nicely with head and heart. But yeah, most of the traditions are identify the location of the Hara in the same place, which is good news because clearly they're talking about the same energy center if they're describing it in the same place. And generally they'll talk about it being 3 fingers widths, so like if you're holding your fingers like this, 3 finger widths below the navel, and then 2 or 3 finger widths kind of inside the body. So it's essentially this energy center that's just kind of right below the navel, but kind of, internal to the kind of the belly region. And this center sometimes is depicted as being larger than the other 2 centers. And I think part of that is because It's a center that usually contains a lot of energy or prana or chi. And I think actually energetically, it does tend to be bigger than the other two centers when you've worked with it and activated and developed it over time. So that's the location of the Hara center, or the belly center. But sometimes you can use Hara just to refer to your whole body. It doesn't have to just refer to the actual energetic center of the Hara. Some people find it easier to think of the Hara as just the entry point into the body and how you're feeling kind of somatically and physically overall. So either kind of use of the Hara is fine in the context of the work we do around the three centers.
All right. Bill is asking, I'm curious if from a meta perspective, if the head, heart, and Hara aligns in any way to the Christian ideas of the Trinity. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question, and because the Christian tradition often talks about the soul as being tripartite, meaning it has three different parts, and they're usually thought of as body, mind, and spirit. So body, mind, and spirit don't line up kind of one-to-one with, the Hara, heart, and head, because in a sense, Hara, heart, and head are, body, emotions, and mind. And you find this a lot in the different traditions. Some traditions will emphasize kind of the body, emotions, and thinking or mind, and some will identify and work with, the body, the mind, and the spirit. When you take a meta view, you can get an expanded cartography that's basically, body or Hara, heart or emotions, mind, soul, and then spirit. Right. So there's kind of like these 5 different components of the human experience and the human being. And a lot of traditions will highlight 3 of those 5. So you kind of have the body, mind, spirit traditions, and then you have kind of the Hara, heart, head traditions. But there are links between them in the sense that from a meta view, both types of systems are talking about, kind of a more gross or energetic layer, a more emotional layer, or mental layer, and then a more soulful or spiritual kind of layer. So they're trying to identify, whether you're doing a body, mind, spirit system or a head, heart, Hara system, that there's kind of a gross, subtle, and causal, aspect to, the human being. And so different traditions will kind of emphasize different centers or aspects of that human landscape to kind of communicate, more or less the same idea. And we will be getting into this more. And, one of the bonus clips that you'll get with the course is related to, the 3 souls. And the Christian tradition, in a sense, is a version of the triple soul traditions, which emphasize the body, mind, spirit aspect. And so in those triple soul traditions, you have more of that happening, whereas the 3 wisdom center traditions is a slightly different layer of human experience and embodiment. But of course, being aware of and working with both, is even more powerful than just working with one of them isolated.
Thank you. Here's one. I'm so curious about how the Celtic tradition informs this work. You mentioned it is at the forefront of your work now. How did you get into this? How did you get introduced to the system? And can you tell us more about the energies we'll be accessing through this system? Will we be journeying?
Yeah, great question. So I love that because that's a question that basically kind of sneaks in like 3 or 4 questions, which is my style of asking questions, right? To try and get as much insight and information as possible. So let me see if I can respond to all those different aspects. Yes, it is, one of the main, traditions I work with. I work with 3 or 4 traditions in an ongoing way, and the Celtic path has been one of those for a number of years now. And, I think my entry point into that was just, I was really involved with Tibetan Buddhism and Diamond Heart for about a decade. And when my daughter was born, my first daughter, I ended up not being able to go to formal retreats the way I had been for quite some time. And so I wasn't as engaged with, weekend and week-long retreats in either of those traditions. And what I discovered emerged kind of in that, kind of blank space of my practice, because I was just trying to be a parent and get enough sleep, was a real soul impulse towards working with nature spirits, elementals, the fairy realm, and just kind of all the subtle intelligences that are connected to the natural world. Because a lot of my work prior had been around ecology and sustainability. And so I was very interested in kind of the subtle energetic and intelligence connected to the natural world. And I started to explore and discover that there are a number of traditions, spiritual paths that work with that in that domain. And one of them is Orion Foxwood's work, and he talks about the three centers and the three souls in that work as well that are part of many of the Celtic paths. And so that led me down, kind of the rabbit hole of exploring this more and more. And then I discovered that the ancient Druids, worked very actively with the three cauldrons. And when I came across that, I was just stunned because I'd been working with the Enneagram for many, many years. And I really loved the kind of, head, heart and body, or moving center of the Enneagram system. So when I came across that there were these three cauldrons and that they seemed essentially the same as what the Enneagram works with, I was just hooked. I wanted to know more. And, in the three cauldrons, talks about how you have to activate the energy of each cauldron and you have to turn the cauldron so it's upright, right? And that, when we're born, not all of our cauldrons are upright in the sense that they can contain and hold energy in the cup, in the center, in the cauldron. And so, as I mentioned in, the earlier video that I think a lot of you might have seen when we introduced the course, that the Celtic tradition, really thinks of the centers or the cauldrons as entry points into the muse and into poetry and writing poetry. And so, each center kind of provides a different access to the energies that the poet needs to be able to write really good poems or to, be a bard and sing beautifully. And this is quite different than what a lot of the other, triple wisdom center traditions highlight. So that's one of the things that I love about the Celtic approach, because a couple of years ago, I had the soul impulse to start to learn to play the violin and to sing with the violin, right? And people generally do not sing alongside playing their violin. So it's not easy to find examples or teachers for that. So in terms of your question about are we going to be journeying, yes, one of the practices that we'll be doing that week will be, a visualization practice. And that can be, kind of an entry point into connecting with the other world, right? The fairy realm, as it were, because many of the triple, wisdom center traditions acknowledge that each center connects us to a different realm. And so this is very true with the Celtic tradition. And so we'll be looking at how, each center connects us to the land, the sea and the sky, and how we can, kind of journey forth into those realms and even encounter some of the subtle beings that are connected to that landscape. So I hope I was able to cover kind of all the facets of that question.
Definitely. Here's actually a good backup to that that someone sent in, and that is that I'm not really an artist or interested in poetry. I'm more linear focused. And
Right.
How will studying the Celtic tradition support me, or is that mainly for artists and creatives?
Yeah, great question. And no, it's absolutely not just for artists. It's more, think of it more as like connecting with the creativity that's possible, through each center. And so whatever you're doing, whether it's work, or parenting, or, just, your anything in life that you're bringing your embodied awareness to can really benefit from, connecting with the clarity. And in a way, it's really about being alive and being inspired, right? And then how do you translate that inspiration into, your day-to-day life? And so each of the three centers can provide a unique access point to kind of, being integrated and being inspired, and then kind of bringing that aliveness and that passion and that purpose into what you do. And you might find as you explore, this aspect, when we're doing that week, that you might be more of an artist than you realize, right? And we might just have to kind of, expand the definition of artist. But people really find the three cauldrons work to be really cool and interesting. And I suspect, given you're asking the question, that even though it might seem a little foreign, that you really are going to get a lot out of that week.
Thanks, Shawn. Let's see. Siaran, I think her name is Siaran, asks, I know you have studied Vajrayana Buddhism, and I was wondering how you relate Vajrayana concepts of body, speech, and mind, where body is associated with the brain center, speech with the throat center, and mind associated with the heart center in your model.
Yeah, I have studied Vajrayana Buddhism quite a bit and still do. It's one of my main sources of practice, particularly working with Dan Brown these days in the Mahamudra context. And yeah, the Buddhist tradition's so amazing. They have so many different combinations of threes, like almost more than any other system I've worked with. And sometimes I just get dizzy because they have so many kind of triple configurations of this, that, and the other thing. And I have looked at the relationship between the body, speech, and mind, and how that relates to head, heart, and hara. And there are some links, but my sense of it at this point is that it's just another layer of our embodied spiritual, potential and path, and that they're really quite different kind of aspects of human experience, even though there are some links. There is, one of the ways that I found the Vajrayana tradition to connect more with the three centers is that in some of the early sutras, there were three bodhisattvas who were introduced as being kind of the really important bodhisattvas, and they're sometimes called the three lords. And this is Manjushri, Avalokitesvara, and Vajrapani. And when you look at how those three bodhisattvas are talked about in the context of these early sutras, they're essentially talking about wisdom, which is the head center, the compassion, which is the heart center in a sense, and then power, Vajrapani with power, which is the hara center. And in some of the tankas that present these three lords of the realms, you'll have usually Manjushri at the top, Avalokitesvara kind of in the middle, and then Vajrapani at the bottom. And I found this very interesting because I think they're not necessarily connecting these to the three centers in the way that the different traditions we're going to be looking at do, but it's almost like they're tapping into kind of the archetypal kind of landscape of these centers and intuitively placing those bodhisattvas in an order that kind of in a fractal way taps into the three centers in our own, human body and subtle energy system. So yeah, and in the course we can explore more kind of the links between Tibetan Buddhism and the three centers, because there's other ways they connect as well.
Jackie is saying, I've studied and practiced the Enneagram for over 20 years, and the three centers are embedded in me. Since you began in that system, what will taking this course open up for me around the three centers?
Yeah, and this is my own journey, right? Because I really, did my first deep dive into an integrative system by going into the Enneagram, and it's been, the primary system I've worked with for over 20 years. I often joke that it's saved my marriage, at least 3 times, because my wife's very familiar with the Enneagram and she uses it in her integral psychotherapy work. And I just find it's such an insightful system. It just keeps on giving. Like there's just so many layers to it. So this is a really good question because, I really started to study the other traditions, in part because I really found the three centers of the Enneagram to be such a useful path for my own development and integration that I wanted to go deeper into the three centers. And so when I then discovered, the three cauldrons of the Druidic Celtic tradition, I went into that and I got insights about the three centers that are not available in the Enneagram. And then I realized the three Dantians of the Chinese, system, essentially are the same three centers. So then working with those more around breath and movement, gave me another access to the three centers of the Enneagram, and in some ways helped me appreciate the movement sequences that Gurdjieff, created to explore and express the Enneagram, right? And it's not always easy to be trained in those movement practices and dances, though it's becoming more available these days. But so the Qigong and Tai Chi and, breathing and movement work kind of allowed me to access that layer of the Enneagram, right? And similarly, the other traditions, like the neuroscience and looking at how we have a neural net in each three, then helped me understand better that Gurdjieff actually talks about these three centers as the three brains. But he was doing that before neuroscience was where it is today. And yet it's almost like he was kind of foreshadowing or tapping into an intuitive sense that these are brains, and they actually literally are. We now have the science that shows how many neurons we have in the gut, how many neurons we have in the heart, how many neurons we have in the brain. And it turns out we have the most in the brain. The second number is in the gut, and then the fewer amount is in the heart. But so in essence, each of the traditions actually helped me deepen my understanding of the Enneagram's three centers, sometimes in a way that was consistent with how the Enneagram holds it. But in many cases, these traditions shone a light on new aspects of the three centers that the Enneagram doesn't touch on. For instance, the Rudolf Steiner approach in anthroposophy, he has identified four separate senses, like we have our five, senses of sight, hearing, taste, touch, and so forth. Rudolf Steiner's identified four unique senses with each of the three centers. So going into that work and kind of discovering those senses and working with those senses opened up whole new realms of understanding what the Enneagram is talking about when it's working with the three centers. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how this can support you as a deep Enneagram practitioner, but also for those of you who are more steeped in other traditions can get from my response to this question how if you have expertise or have worked with any of these traditions in depth, how studying the other traditions can kind of help you deepen how the centers are understood in your tradition, but also expose you to new layers and aspects or essential qualities of each center as you work with these other traditions. And this is why I love this course, is because we go really deep into the three centers, but we do that by going really wide and looking at, 6 different traditions and how they work with these three centers.
Anat is asking, how can I overcome my inner afraidness to achieve my goals? How do I increase my self-confidence?
Oh, beautiful. Well, and this is like really kind of at the heart of it, because by developing a relationship with the three centers, and a much of the course and, the practices we do each week is really about building your dialogue with each of the three centers. Because generally when we start this process, for those of you, are doing this work kind of for the first time, then these three centers are kind of, they're in us and we can sense them at times, but we don't have a real distinct relationship with them. By kind of differentiating them in our embodied awareness and developing a connection to them, learning the unique language of each of the centers, it really supports us on so many levels. It supports us with, getting out of the bed in the morning. It supports us with successful projects that we're working on. And it really can address, fear and anxiety and a lot of the, emotions and issues that we face, just by living in our complex world. So a lot of the practices are really aimed at, supporting us in our day-to-day activity, and doing that by building kind of a stronger bridge between our awareness and each of the centers, and then starting to integrate them. And hopefully you got a little bit of a taste of this with the opening practice, right? Where we just did a simple check-in with the three centers. And that, for instance, can help you see like, oh, in my heart, there's a lot of fear and tenderness and uncertainty. In my Hora, I feel a little grounded, but it's kind of tenuous. In my mind, I feel, it's just racing around. Right. So then it's like, okay, now you can start to work with that. Okay, what do I need to do to kind of help the mind quiet? How do I allow the heart to feel safe and open more, right? What do I need to do to ground my body, right? So, okay, I need to go on my walks again because those really help me feel anchored. And I really need to communicate a few things with my friend because it's really weighing heavy on me, and I can sense that now that I'm checking in. And in my mind, I really want to work with my breath more because I have found that often helps me kind of settle in, right? So kind of by working with the three centers and kind of getting a better sense of where they're at, in our life and each day, then we can make small micro adjustments with what we're doing, our diet, our conversations that really help kind of allow each center to settle in and open and relax and start talking to each other, right? And this is the integrative work of them kind of bringing them together. And one of the cool things about the 6 traditions we're going to look at, but also, there's about 6 or 7 other traditions we're not getting into in this course so much, but I've been studying as well. And the majority of these traditions that work with the 3 centers really talk about the importance of activating each one and then integrating them. And then by integrating them, we're much more capable of facing the day, living our purpose, and being in meaningful relationships. So I think you'll find that a lot of the simple practices we do are really going to support you in the context of the question that you've asked.
Thanks, Shawn. We're here with Shawn Esbjorn-Hargens learning about his course, Integrating Your Head, Heart, and Hora, which begins on Thursday, February 13th. Please log on to 3wisdomcenters.com, 3wisdomcenters.com, and you'll find the details and a link to register. Shawn, what does it take to fully integrate something?
Wow. That's the $1 million question, right? And, one of the bonus clips, actually went into the 10 meta principles of integration. So I've thought a lot about this because I love all things integral. The primary thing it takes, and this is this is the secret sauce, if you will, to integration, is it really comes down to what Robert Kegan, developmental psychologist at Harvard, talks about in terms of subject to object moves, right? And this is essentially taking something that's subject, something that you can't see, you're kind of embedded in it, it's kind of behind your awareness, or you're kind of swimming in it like a fish in water. And you take that and you bring it around and make it an object of awareness. And then in a sense, you're differentiating it, you're making it a focus of consciousness, you can see it, and then you can be in dialogue with it. And then through dialogue and engagement with it, then you can integrate it into yourself in a conscious way. So whether you're looking at the therapeutic traditions or the contemplative traditions, the somatic traditions, the therapeutic traditions, all of them are really working with different techniques to take what is subject to us and make it an object of awareness. And so this is the real core of integration, is that you have to differentiate first, and once you differentiate, then you can integrate. And so how this shows up in the course we're doing is we're engaging each of the 3 centers, the head, the heart, and the hora, and differentiating them from the field of awareness of our own embodied experience. And by differentiating them and starting to understand each of them on their own terms, we're essentially making them an object of awareness, right? We're tapping into the essential qualities of the mind, the essential qualities of the heart, the essential qualities of the hara or the body. And then by differentiating them, then we can begin the process of integrating them, right? So there's more to say on that, but hopefully that gives you, at least an initial sense of kind of the key to integration and how it links to what we're doing, because each of the different practices we do each week deepens that differentiation of the 3 centers, but also increases the integration across the 3 centers, right? So that's why we do these different practices, because each one kind of shines a different light on these realities within us. And shining that light on them is essentially the subject to object move, taking it from an embedded, embodied way, pulling it forward so we can see it as a distinct layer of our experience, and then kind of working with it in a more conscious fashion.
Thank you. Kathy is asking, will we get direction about how to translate this into working with clients? And if so, how?
Yeah, absolutely. All the practices can be used with oneself, or with others. And, I'm a coach. I work with a lot of executives, CEOs and founders, and a lot of people just, engaged in their own kind of integral life, process. And I work with these practices, with myself and with them. So all of these practices that you'll learn are ones that you can work with clients and in any number of contexts. And it doesn't just have to be like in a coaching context. It could be, as a yoga instructor or as a parent, or, if you're doing caregiving, so there's these practices, all are useful in a variety of contexts. And you likely will find some of the practices resonate with you more than some of the others. And that's kind of the point of exploring 6 traditions is, you'll find 2 or 3 or 4 that, really touch you and that you then want to work with and explore more. And then you can begin using those practices with yourself. And then as you get more comfortable with, your own engagement with those practices, then you can share them and work with other people. And all the practices are generally what I think of as mini practices or micro practices that you can do in less than 5 minutes, even though they have longer, 15 to 30 minute variations. The idea in the course is to really equip you with kind of a triple wisdom center toolbox of practices and techniques, so that you can, engage this in, various moments throughout your day, or as the question asks, with other people and with clients.
Mohammed asks, I want to know how to control or focus my mind to a particular singular topic. As our minds are used to having so many thoughts at a time, how will your course support me in this?
Yeah, this is a cool question because it highlights something that I think is really interesting. And that is often, and this sometimes comes from, the Enneagram system is good at pointing this out. If we want to quiet the mind, initially we might think with the mind that we need to work with the head center or the mind in order to learn how to quiet it. Well, that can be a way of doing it. Generally, that's not the best way forward. Usually by working with the other centers, the heart center and the Hora center, is what can help the mind get more quiet, right? So it's kind of counterintuitive, but it points back to the integrative nature of these 3 centers. Similarly, like if our heart is really closed and we've really had difficult, relationships and breakups and betrayals, and the heart is, really tender, sometimes what can help the heart is connecting more with the body and the Hora and being more present, and then using the mind, the essential qualities of the mind, to help the heart kind of feel safe, right? So it's kind of like you work with the Hora in the head to allow the heart to start to kind of heal and repair and open. Similarly with the mind, I've, been a practitioner and a meditator for, 30 years. And I have found the primary way for me to quiet the monkey mind is dropping into the Hora and working with the body and just becoming really present. And then that allows the mind to relax and for me to connect with the essential qualities of the mind, right? So different people, depending on your personality structure and your kind of Enneagram type and all of that, will have a different combination of centers to work with in order to unlock each of the centers. And this will be kind of one of the things that we explore across all the different weeks.
Goldie is asking, how can I be led by my heart?
Wow. Yeah. So this, is learning to listen to your heart, right? And often we're not very good at listening to our mind in its essential nature. Like we hear our mind talking all the time and chattering, but that's not really the essential nature of the mind. That's our thinking self. That's, just kind of the getting through the day and dealing with all the things we have to track and manage, right? So there's something to be said about learning to connect with the essential nature of each of the 3 centers. And this is true for the heart as well. Even people who are really passionate and emotional, and dynamic and, have a wide range of emotional capacity and have a high emotional intelligence. I have found even working with clients such as that they're often not in touch with the essential nature of the heart, right? They're in touch with other good qualities and aspects of the heart, or also, contracted and distorted aspects of the heart, and it can be a mixture. But by learning to dialogue, like we started with the practice today, by learning to dialogue with each of the three centers, then we start to really hear the voice of the heart and how the heart actually can lead us. And but we have to, we have to use the Hora to slow down. We have to use the mind to get clear. And then that can help the essential message that our heart has for us to start to come forward. And so a lot of the practices we'll be doing are essentially learning to listen to and understand the language of each of the three centers, because the language of the head is very different than the language of the heart, which in turn is very different from the language of the Hora. And different people have more access to one of those languages than the other typically. Like some people are better at connecting to the essence of the head, others the essence of the Hora, right? And so part of what will happen as we go through the traditions and explore the practices, you'll get a better sense of in what ways are you already able to access the essential nature of the heart, and in what ways might you be able to deepen and expand that capacity and really discern between the essential nature of the heart and maybe some other aspects of the heart that might at first seem kind of like the essential nature, but upon deeper engagement and inquiry, you discover that there's another layer, there's another aspect to the heart, and that I'm just now learning to listen to and understand that language.
We have a few questions related to the touching into Qigong and how that will impact on the physical realm. Elizabeth asks, will you be showing us how Qigong might help with my aching lower back and knees?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'll be able to go into that much, right? Though, because we'll be focusing on the three dantians and how to build up energy in the three dantians. Now, the Chinese medicine system has a very complex way of understanding, the relationship between the energies in the three dantians and specific ailments, such as the ones that you've mentioned. So it's very likely that as we explore that, and look at some of the readings and so forth, you might start to see some links and connections. And at the same time, just by working with the three dantians and the movement techniques and the breath techniques, you might find, some initial, support and relief around those ailments. And I'll be happy, in the context of the course to engage you and others around, the physical body and different benefits, as related to the three dantians and moving energy through them. But I don't have a real deep practice in Chinese medicine, and so some of those connections are likely beyond my expertise. But I think you'll find working with the energy centers, most people report the support that provides physically and energetically, across their body. So generally, people have the experience that there is some kind of immediate benefits energetically and physically. Whether that'll translate for you in terms of those particular challenges, I don't know. But hey, let's explore and see what we can learn, because every time I teach this material, I learn new connections between the three centers and, different aspects of our embodiment. And so through engagement with each other, you might help me understand, some links between that I'm not currently aware of.
Thanks, Shawn. So we have time for a few more questions, and we'll be getting over to those in just a moment. But before we do, I want to give you a few details about integrating your head, heart, and Hora. So this is going to be a transformative 7 weeks with Shawn, as you can hear. You're going to discover a variety of powerful ways to tune into your wisdom centers based on sacred traditions from all over the world. And this 7-module course takes place on Thursdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, starting February 13th. You'll receive audio and video replays, transcripts, and any other materials through our course homepage. Also, I'd like to remind you that we offer a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses, giving a full 2 weeks, in this case until February the 27th, to make sure that you absolutely love the course. And as an added bonus, everyone is invited to join a private course Facebook group. It's our community group over on Facebook, where you can connect with one another and integrate the teachings there. Everyone who registers receives the Integrating Your Head, Heart, and Hora bonus collection, and this includes Our Three Souls. This is a video teaching from Shawn. Also, Cultivating Tetra Awareness Meditation. That's an audio from Shawn. The Power of Three in the Enneagram. This is a video with Shawn. And for those of you that know you want in and are ready to register now, if you register by midnight Pacific tonight, January the 30th, you'll receive this additional bonus called the 10 Meta Principles of Integration, the video with Shawn. The video represents 10 meta principles of integration that Shawn has identified, and he'll share his knowledge and experience of just how to support integration in your day-to-day life. All right, we have this question that came over. The monkey mind comes forward loud and clear. How will this course support me in shifting into higher mind? Sometimes, no matter how I try, that monkey mind is the loudest.
Yeah, and this touches in with what I was sharing earlier about how working with the mind and monkey mind often is best served by actually working with the heart or the Hara. So part of it is using the 6 traditions that we're going to be exploring to help understand the mind and different facets and aspects of the mind, both in its contracted monkey mind expression, but also in its essential nature, right? So we're going to get a lot of insight about connecting with the mind, just by looking at how the head center is explored in each of the traditions, but then also learning how to augment the mind and support the mind by activating the other centers. And this is where some of the traditions, not all of them, but some of the traditions, the 3 center traditions, will talk about a 4th center. And the central teaching there is that if you activate the 3 centers and integrate them, it then opens up a 4th center, which I actually call the halo, right? Because it's above the head, essentially. And so sometimes people will think of the higher mind in that context of connecting with our higher self or the halo center. So we will be exploring kind of how to access the higher octave, as it were, of all 3 centers. The Enneagram's really good at talking about the virtues of the heart and the higher holy ideas of the mind and so forth. And so there is a way in which each of the centers can be thought of and explored in terms of this higher octave that becomes available through deep engagement with each of the centers. And because the head center, most of us really struggle with various versions of monkey mind, it'll be a constant theme in the course of how to work with that in the context of working with the other centers. Because generally the mind is very crazy. The heart is, kind of talkative, and the belly center is very quiet. So it's very interesting that each center kind of has a different degree of volume, a different degree of expressiveness in terms of language, right? Where the Hora generally just states something in a single word, kind of like no or go or yes, whereas the heart tends to have a lot of emotionally expressive, aspects to it, and then the mind's just kind of going crazy. So by learning how each of these centers kind of operates and expresses itself, you'll start to gain a lot of insight in how to work with your monkey mind.
Here's a couple of questions about grounding. Kathleen asks, what role does grounding play in these teachings? And Yolanda's asking, how can we maintain grounding in order to be able to maintain our centers?
Yeah, this is interesting because we often think of grounding in the context of the Hara center or the body, right? Of kind of, getting present, feeling our feet on the ground, or feeling our butt in the chair and just kind of, or just feeling centered in life, right? Because a lot of Tai Chi practitioners, they build up the chi in the lower dantian, and that allows them to be very grounded, where it's like their feet kind of go into the earth, right? And it's hard to move them or push them over. So in some sense, grounding is very much connected to the Hara center. That being said, there is a quality of grounding that comes from all 3 centers. When the heart is relaxed and open and able to be vulnerable and expressive, there's a certain kind of grounding that comes with that. It's like kind of the heart as grounded. And likewise, with the head center, when it's quiet and discriminating and has a sense of clarity and vision and purpose, that's a certain quality of groundedness. It's like, so each center has its own form of groundedness. And this is why we want to activate each of the centers and kind of integrate them, because then that opens up, kind of a new dimension, a new layer of our spiritual, process and path, right? So we'll be exploring groundedness both in terms of the belly center and its particular important role with being grounded, but then also looking at how each of the three centers, the heart and the head, also have a contribution to make to, the first person experience of being grounded.
Right. Here's one. I heard you say that in one system, we might find we are open in the mind, whereas in another system, it might be the heart. This confused me. Can you say more about that?
Right. Yeah, it is confusing. So, because each of the traditions kind of works with a different layer of the centers, right? So if we just think of the heart center, right? And the heart center has many qualities and aspects. And, the Enneagram works with, certain parts of that. The, Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy works with certain parts of that. Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga system works with certain parts of that. So when we start working through these systems and these traditions, people will find like, oh, when I work with integral yoga, the aspect of heart that integral yoga focuses on, I feel a lot of access to, and I feel like that part of my heart center is open or, more available to me. But when I work with the Qigong system and, the Dantians, I have a harder time connecting with the subtle energy in my heart domain, right? And so I realize I want to work more to try and activate and access that aspect of the heart center as presented by, the Chinese, or Taoist system, right? So because each of the centers is multifaceted, there's many layers and kind of dimensions to them. Each of the traditions we go through tend to be good at certain parts of those centers and not as aware of or engaged with other parts of those centers. So this is what's wonderful about kind of working through the 6 traditions, is each one kind of gives us an entry point into each of the centers as understood by that tradition. And we'll find that in some traditions, we're able to connect with the 3 centers in a different way than through the other tradition, right? And this just helps highlight the rich possibilities of relationship we can have with the centers, and how working through the traditions, really supports us to kind of figure out in what ways am I have access to the Hora, and in which ways do I not have access to the Hora, and likewise for the other centers. So hopefully that helps kind of remove some of the confusion. And so as we explore together, it'll become more obvious, but you really have to get into each of the traditions and kind of learn more about the specific aspects of those centers as presented by the traditions.
Nicole is asking, I'm a new mother, and how can I cultivate my child's connection to head, heart, and Hara?
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. And I have 2 daughters. And this also gets into what I was saying before, how you can work with these practices with, as a parent, or with clients. The nice thing about children is they generally have more immediate access to, each of the 3 centers. And it's more over time that we become disconnected from them, or they become more distorted. So by being more aware of your own 3 centers, then you can kind of tune in and resonate with your children, through their 3 centers, right? And I do this with coaching clients a lot, as well as with my kids, is I will kind of use my Hara center to feel into the Hara center of my daughter. And kind of when she's having, a difficult time and, wanting to understand that, I'll kind of use it like a tuning fork to kind of try and feel into the energetic field of her own Hara. And likewise, I'll use the heart, my own heart, and an activated heart, to feel into her emotional landscape, right? And hear what she's saying to me kind of through the heart center opposed to the mind center, right? And so you can kind of use each of your own centers as like tuning forks, right? You like hit the tuning fork and it's like vibrates and allows you to, kind of connect with that vibration in another person, right? And so this can be a really powerful way of parenting and working with clients, is kind of by activating your own set of centers then using those as an entry point into the centers of the other people or the children. So this is the kind of thing we can explore together. And part of what's wonderful about the course is you're not just going to be hearing from me and my experience of doing these things, but people are going to be sharing their own experience of what it's like to parent working with the centers or working with a coaching client using the centers. So there's a real rich conversation that emerges in the course where we really get the wisdom of all the participants. And that really goes way beyond, what I'm able to offer individually, even though I have a real, deep engagement with all of this. So by you sharing kind of your own process, then people in the course will be able to amplify and add to that as well.
So you touched on this a little bit ago, this question that had come in through the webcast. I'm seeing you'll be touching into integral yoga. What is that? And will there be a somatic aspect to this teaching?
Yeah, many of the traditions we'll be working with have a somatic aspect, though sometimes they'll be more energetic. And different traditions, can have both. Like with, the Taoist tradition, there's a very strong energetic aspect, but also through movement, there can be a more kind of, somatic aspect. With integral yoga is the system that Sri Aurobindo developed over the course of his life. And it's a very complex, very sophisticated system. It's very integral. I mean, it's a very impressive, approach to human development. And he talks about how these three planes, he calls them planes, the kind of the physical, the vital, and the mental, are really foundational to, building an integral life. And so his yoga, while it does have kind of, movement and yoga in the way that we think of yoga in the West, it's not about that as much as kind of just the yoga of, working with your own development and integration. And, and there's a lot of different practices they work with. So it's not so much about doing asanas, for instance. And so the integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo, will look at these three planes of development and how working with those really in his system, as is the case with so many of the systems, is really the foundation for the spiritual path. Right. And this is what's fascinating, is that so many of the traditions basically say, if you really want to grow and develop and be an integrated human being, you really have to work with these three centers, right? Or these three planes, or these three, Dantians, or these three, kind of domains, because they really become the foundation for the spiritual life that, is possible standing on that foundation.
Well, Shawn, we're coming to the end of our time. I really would like to have you share with us what you're looking most forward to share with your students who decide to take the journey with you.
Well, these questions have been awesome. I really enjoyed them. And I wish we were in a space where we could have some back and forth so that I could know if my response to your question really landed and satisfied your question. And this is what I love about the course, is we can have that more dialogical space back and forth, and we can kind of get into this in a much more, engaged, deeper way, and make sure that, you're getting the insights and understanding that you're really wanting around this. For me, it's so wonderful to work with people around these three centers, because time and time again, as I teach this material, I just find that it's kind of like the biggest bang for your buck. Like they're very simple practices, and yet the impact that people report from working with them is really extraordinary. And, I was telling Anne earlier that I find the three centers to be kind of like this secret hiding in plain sight. It's like the Rosetta Stone to our own human flourishing and transformation. And so by working with you and going deep into this, I'm just excited to see how your own lives are transformed as a result of developing a deep dialogue between you and each of your three centers, and also for you to teach me and for me to learn from your own experience and your own understanding of these traditions, because many of the people in the course will be Qigong experts, or, have worked with Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga for a decade, or, be doing Enneagram consulting work in businesses, right? So there's a quality of collective wisdom and expertise that emerges in the class that I'm really looking forward to. And the questions today just are an indicator that, wow, this is going to be amazing. And I really can't wait to dive into all of this with each of you.
Well, it's been a wonderful hour. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Integrating Your Head, Heart, and Hara begins Friday, February the 13th. Actually, that's Thursday, the 13th. Let me just make sure of that. Yes, it's on Thursdays, February 13th, starting. And I'd love to have you go over to visit our website, 3wisdomcenters.com. That's 3wisdomcenters.com. You'll learn all about this course and look through the modules. You can also register there as well. And for those of you that want to join us and know you do and register by midnight tonight, January the 30th, you'll receive the special video teaching entitled The 10 Meta Principles of Integration. So, Shawn, I'd love to pass it over to you for final words to our listeners.
Yeah, so I've enjoyed the questions and engagement today. I'm really looking forward to exploring the 3 wisdom centers with you in the course. As I mentioned, we're going to go deep, and we go deep by going wide. And each of these sacred traditions have a lot to show us and tell us. And yeah, I'm looking forward to you joining me on this adventure of integration.
Thanks, Shawn. All right, everyone, thank you for being here. And on behalf of all of us here at the Shift Network, we wish you well, and we look forward to having you on this course or on one in the future. Be well.